Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to The Takeout. Let's face it, these are dangerous times. Rhetoric, weapons, encrypted places where plotters can recruit and assume they can hide. All appear present and more than mildly alarming in a plot thwarted by federal law enforcement to attack the UFC fights on the south lawn of the White House. 5 suspects thus far have been arrested. They face an array of federal charges, up to and including conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence, of course, will be tested in court, but affidavits today allege the plot envisioned drone attacks to force spectators from the White House South Lawn into public spaces, where snipers would then, it is alleged, attack. The motives? Diffuse. Opposition to billionaires, suspicion of a Jeffrey Epstein cover-up, hostility to data centers, hostility to U.S. support for Israel, hunger for anti-government revolution. Matt Quinn, Deputy Director of the Secret Service, spoke to reporters today at a separate incident here in Washington.
Look, it was a serious threat. We take all threats of a large nature very seriously, and we investigate them until we can validate 100% that it's no longer a threat. It was an active plot, and it's ongoing.
Investigators got a tip from a family member of one of the suspects charged. That head start allowed federal agents to get their arms around the plot and beef up security. Canceling the UFC event was, we are told, never seriously considered.
I'm not going to comment on reality or realism of being able to carry it out. What I'll tell you is we're going to take every threat on its face. If you say you're going to do it, we're going to believe you until we can prove otherwise.
This is a multi-layered story, and it is still unfolding. For what we know at this hour, let me bring in Justice Department reporter Jake Rosen. So, Jake, what do we know?
Well, we know that 5 people are currently in federal detention and custody as a result of this plot, which seemed to come together in the last couple of months, but really in the last week or so. About a week and a half ago, these group members who met on TikTok originally, then shifted to Signal and then to another different messaging app, all started to discuss what they would do to move and, quote, jumpstart, in the words of one of these men in a message, the crisis in the United States, to amplify the failures of President Trump and to
create maybe a second revolution in their terminology.
And we've seen this over a number of attacks in the U.S. in the last couple of months. It's to accelerate whether it is a race war or potential future problems between political parties. An event like this, built for America's 250th celebration, no matter what you think of actually having the event
basically
itself,
a crisis in government of some kind that would dislodge a lot of other energy and maybe bring the whole thing down.
Exactly. And what we know is that there was enough action taken in this plan that, at least for one of these men, whose name is Tyson Proper, he lived in Ohio, his parents reported him to federal law enforcement.
That was the tip.
That was the main tip that set all of this off. Eventually, because of homicidal tendencies, quoting law enforcement, this man was eventually committed to a hospital where federal law enforcement investigated him, talked to him, and went through his phone. From what we know across all different 5 documents that are, for now, the initial charging documents against these men, there was a plan to, in at least 4 tiers, have people be in the active line of fire, causing this damage, have drone operators within the city limits somehow, if they could get drones to fly in D.C., which, as we know, the Secret Service and the police here in Washington make it very difficult for any private drone to be flying around any kind of these events. Then a, quote, underground railroad of people to get these people out of the city.
An extrication plan.
An extrication process, and then a support network of influencers and funders, and they said even potentially journalists, to move these people and create a narrative around the kind of event of what they wanted. In all the different FBI searches across the country that we saw, there was weaponry found, guns, ammunition, tactical gear, and tactical vests. However, what we don't know, Major, is how far this group got into actually getting those drones that would have been at the heart of the attack. And really the most scary part, as we consider Americans and what warfare looks like going forward, or a domestic terror attack, there was really only just discussion about getting access to these drones and an explosive device to pair them up, but really a striking scene, especially given the last couple of months of conflict here in D.C.
And law enforcement has a terminology, howlers, people who talk a big game. Clearly there was enough, they thought, in this conversation to suggest that they were contemplating something with enough specificity that this was chargeable.
Yeah, and it was. And we saw Matt Quinn, who's the deputy director of the Secret Service, say as much today. That, and I think when you read through the rest of this, what we saw was enough movement in this space in the last couple of days where they had picked the event as this UFC event as the thing. They had seen other movement to come to the U.S., a rallying point in Virginia for everybody to meet up with each other and then go deploy themselves across the city. In some of these screenshots from Signal that this man, Tyson Proper, showed law enforcement, there were specific locations around D.C. that were circled on documents and maps that were sent to this 19-person group. We also know there's a little bit of fractionalization. There were some smaller groups of 4 or 5 people about what specific plans were. So how close they got to actually having something concrete and actionable is really irrelevant here because of just the threat nexus that we're seeing around the country and just bringing this amount of people to D.C. As we've seen over the last couple of months. President Trump, despite having the threats against his life, the attempted assassinations, still willing to bring big crowds to D.C. And we know that he's planning to bring another big rally to the National Mall in the next couple of months. And the same kind of threat or action plan could be potentially brought there too, right? Causing a distraction, causing an incident and to happen, and then finding a way to get people, whether they're the lawmakers that were being targeted for any number of reasons, or just high-profile individuals, and causing this kind of chaos that these people specifically wanted to cause.
Dangerous times indeed. Jake Rosen, appreciate it very much.